Okay, sounds good. So, Pam and Joe, are you guys ready to start?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, go.
Welcome back to Stanford Legal, where we look at the cases, questions, conflicts, and legal stories that affect us all every day. I'm Pam Carlin, along with Joe Bankman, and our guests on this segment are Erik Jensen and Sean Rosenberg. And Sean, you have been to Afghanistan in probably more capacities than any other living American. You went there as an infantry officer originally. You've worked on the textbook on Afghan law, and then you were back there this summer, actually in your capacity as somebody, as a kind of budding businessman from the Graduate School of Business. So tell us a little bit about that visit and how that changed your views about the country in some ways.
Absolutely. So I was in Afghanistan this summer working with entrepreneurs and small businesses trying to help Afghans, grow a more organic private sector as opposed to continuing to sort of give them fish, helping people that are trying to learn how to fish. And that was something that I had wanted to do to sort of redefine my relationship with the country, because in my capacity as an Army officer, I was spending most of my time dealing with not the best people in Afghanistan. And it was a really enlightening time to see so many Afghans working to improve Afghanistan. I had the opportunity while I was there to visit the American University and meet some of the professors in the law department, which was fantastic. And sort of like Professor Jensen, there's kind of a negative view and a positive view. And the negative view is, there was a fairly tumultuous summer in Kabul, and there's a lot of uncertainty in Afghanistan right now about what's going to happen as international governments start to leave and people don't really know what's going to happen when the dust will settle. But something that I thought was tremendously positive was just to see so many people in Kabul working so hard to improve the country. And on a couple of the different companies that I was working with, there would be email or text chains that would let you know when there was an attack somewhere in the city. And people would read those and put them down and go back to work. And for the first couple days, I thought that was sort of people just being numb to all the violence there. But I really realized people are working really hard because they realize that through those efforts, they can make Afghanistan a better place in the long run. And nobody knows what the timeline is for that, but there's a population of people in Afghanistan that are working extraordinarily hard to make the future bright there.
And Erik, as you hear this and you think about how do we evaluate the effort and monies that we spend in a place like Afghanistan to support the Rule of Law Project, we support it at the law school and the State Department supports it. How do we know if it's money well spent? How should we think about this?
Well, I always welcome stiff evaluation of the project and the program itself, and I think the textbooks are an acid test of evaluation of the program. I think another acid test is where American University of Afghanistan law graduates go and they get good jobs, and several have come to the U.S. to get LLMs, and they have all returned to Afghanistan, part of this generation that Sean and I are equally inspired by, that really want to change the country. But in financial terms, I think it's useful to think that by the year 2020, we will have received funding from the International Bureau of Narcotics and Law Enforcement of the State Department for 11 years. And the total value of that support is what it costs to deploy about a dozen soldiers in Afghanistan for a year. So the comparative cost of this civil intervention versus a military intervention is quite stark.
So when we think of what, say, the soccer mom is thinking, why should we care about these rule of law projects?
International terrorism is not something that people, I guess, think about every day. I do because of the work that I do. But people get really worried, you know, boarding planes, daily life, worried about security breaches. The international threats are still there. I don't want to preach fear as sometimes is popular today in political discourse, but there is reason to be concerned about your children in the future. And part of this is trying to break through a network of international terrorism. And we've got a lot of work to do.
Well, you can kind of think about, you know, if you think back to 9/11, the people who were born on 9/11 are now the age where they can be enlisting in the military and end up in Afghanistan or Iraq or wherever.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm sort of the answer to that question of why the soccer mom somewhere should care. You know, I grew up on Long Island in an America where the thought of attacks like this didn't happen. And I remember September 11th very clearly. And then sort of the cost of these things, as you know, Professor Jensen had said, is far more than 12 of me goes and handles this problem, and more so than the money. You know, this is stuff that's handled in a very violent manner, and that's something that's really hard to put a value on.
This is Stanford Legal, and today we're talking about the Rule of Law Project at Stanford with Erik Jensen and Sean Rosenberg. And I wonder if you might kind of compare what you've been doing in Afghanistan to some of the other places you've been. I mean, I know that the Rule of Law Project has gone to Rwanda as well, and that was a place with a very different but tragic history immediately before your arrival. So tell us a little bit about what you've been doing there.
Well, you know, Rwanda, you're right, Pam, is at the other end of the spectrum from the extraordinary fragmentation and dysfunctionality of some of the things that we see in Afghanistan. Rwanda is, since the genocide, has enjoyed some fairly strong leadership, and it's a remarkable development story of doubling life expectancy, increasing economic growth incredibly, while also decreasing inequality. So my latest idea on Rwanda is something that we've just started implementing last December when I was there with 2 students. Our law students are co-authoring chapters of a textbook on Introduction to the Laws of Rwanda with members of the University of Rwanda law faculty.
And what's that like experientially?
Well, it's an experiment in progress, Joe, and we will see. I really like the idea because the University of Rwanda law faculty, they're very capable and they really understand the local context. But our students bring, you know, excellent research and writing capacity to the exercise, and we found that the University of Rwanda law faculty is really excited about the project, as are our students. So if that excitement translates, it should be a high quality volume.
I wonder, Erik, you know, you've been doing this for a while now. What you see of our students as they go out into the world, how has this affected them going forward in their professional lives?
I mean, many mention that this is one of the things that they really enjoyed in law school. There is a temptation in the bustle of law school to, you know, write papers for professors, and professors read the papers, and that's the end of the experiment. But the students, I think, have been motivated by writing something that has an enduring quality to it and is for a much broader public. So that's what I think inspires a lot of people. Maybe Sean could chime in.
Yeah, I kind of wonder, Sean, if you think about what you're bringing back, because you've talked a lot about all the contributions you've made here, both, you know, in your time in the military and then writing the textbook chapter and then working with the entrepreneurs. And as you come back to the United States from all of this, does it give you a different perspective on the United States, do you think, and rule of law here?
Absolutely. I think a lot of, on a sort of rule of law level, what Professor Jensen talked about with hope being sort of an underlying issue that people are concerned about, that's not something that's just an issue in the developing world. You see it in America, and I think it's been something that's translatable across the country and across the world, where people really, you know, in my view, are inherently good. And when they lose that hope is when people start to see some of the issues and atrocities that we've seen in these other places. And so that's something that, on a basic level, has really broadened my worldview. And as far as this program, I feel like you can say I've given a lot. I feel like I've gotten a lot more out of it. And coming to school, I didn't want that to be a sort of a 4-year moratorium on feeling like I was doing some sort of service to the world. And this has been a really fantastic program to help me, continue in that search while I've been here.
Well, it's such a touching statement, I think, that you made, Sean. There's so much I think I'd like to explore with both of you, including rule of law in the United States. When you see it not work abroad, are there things that you see happening here? Other parts of the world, hear more about the Rwandan story. But Sean, I think your statement about seeing hope given places and kind of taking that hope back kind of ends this more eloquently than I could.
It does indeed. So thank you both for joining us, and thank you to our listeners for joining us on Stanford Legal here on Sirius XM Insight 121.